Hey everyone, I'm Alicia Esposito, and I'm thrilled to have Chris Walton of OmniTalk joining me today for this Retail Reset conversation. If you're new to Retail Reset at a high level, our goal is to provide curated, thought-provoking conversations with some of the industry's top experts and influencers. And frankly, if you go to Forbes.com, you will see Chris likely everywhere, some of the top trending articles around retail. So Chris, really excited to have you with us today and hopefully dig into some trends.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to talk to you again. It's always fun when we
Yeah,
get together.
I know we had a blast on the podcast, which was just released. So I encourage you all to listen to that if you haven't yet.
Yeah.
So we decided that it would be a good time to connect because it's been a few weeks and frankly, a lot has been going on.
hmm
So let's start there because you're always keeping tabs on what's happening, sharing your unique viewpoint and commentary on how these developments, these events can lead to long-term trends. So what are the big things that you're seeing now? And frankly, what kind of conversations are you having? Because you speak with a lot of industry folk.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it kind of falls into two camps. I think you've got the businesses that have been deemed essential on the retail side that have been ongoing and trying to figure this thing out, as it's all been happening, kind of almost, building the ship as it's on the water, so to speak. And then you've got the other side of the business, which more like shopping malls, specialty apparel that are trying to figure out where do they go next? And I think those are two really different camps. I think on the first camp, initially it was all about safety. And so you saw the initial trends in the beginning where it was, started as plexiglass windows, masks, gloves, and people just even trying to procure all the different things they needed to do business day in and day out. And it took a few weeks to get there. And I think people are finally settling into what are at least the baseline of protective procedures that they're going to try to deploy, whether it's those things I mentioned. You're also seeing traffic metering as a tactic many grocers are starting to take right now. And now I think from there, the question is, how does it advance, right? So you've got a lot of activity happening digitally. You've got a lot of activity now happening via buy online, pick up in store. Best Buy announced today that they are going to appointment only in, I can't remember how many stores. I want to say it was 200 stores,
Yeah, sounds about
possibly.
right.
Is that right? Yeah. And, so you're seeing people start to adjust their models. And then you're also seeing people do some really inventive things like Sam's Club today, I found out, has designated hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays for senior citizens and at-risk people to park their car at a spot. Employees will come to the car, take their order, and then they'll go shop for them. It doesn't require anything digital from the customer. A lot of digital activity required from the sales team member at Sam's Club. But those types of new ways of doing things, I think are starting to happen. You're seeing them being deployed across all aspects of grocery. Whereas the malls haven't really started any of that. Chico's announced this week that they're going to be opening. So yay to Chico's, I guess, on that front. Never thought they'd be the first one leading the charge. But I think now the question for malls is how do they open? And so they're just now at the point, I think, of what are the safety procedures, how you get to the point of, what's next, buy online, pick up in store, curbside, any of that, I think is still an open question, but it's going to be fun to see how it plays out.
Yeah. All right. There's some really good stuff in there. So I want to go back to a few things, kind of break them down.
Yeah, please.
Going back to, some of the safety measures that essential retailers have taken in order to, put both workers and consumers at ease. I'm having a lot of conversations around what that reopening strategy is going to look like at a broader level. So going into non-essential, and there are a lot of there's a lot of emphasis on taking a phased approach, first zeroing in on those safety measures and then kind of scaling from there. So do you almost think that how grocery is adapting or responding, that they're almost providing a blueprint at a high level to kind of help other retailers? Because I know Kroger kind of shared their approach and a lot of people are responding positively to that because they're like, wow, they're being so transparent here. So are there learnings, from the essentials world that non-essential could possibly apply at a big picture?
I think Kroger's a great example. I think yes, but I'd also say it's a double-edged sword to a degree. So I think yes, in terms of what are you seeing in terms of the day-to-day of how people are actually shopping a store, and what are some of the tips and tricks that you can deploy that make people feel safer? Like I remember reading that Kroger report, and one of the things I thought was really interesting that I never thought about was hey, if you have a PA system, how do you come on and make announcements? And what's the appropriate cadence? I think they started at 30 minutes and then they went to 15 minutes. There's all the physical things you can do in terms of signage and things of that nature. So I think having that as a baseline definitely helps people, because it at least gets their mind around, okay, here are the types of things we need to think about before we open up. And that's true of if you're mom and pop or if you're a big retailer. I think where the double-edged sword comes into it that I'm a little hesitant about, and I keep writing about this and talking about this because I think it's really important, is grocery is different. We all have to eat. And I think the other piece is, which we've done a lot of writing about recently, is not everyone has the ability to shop online for groceries. There's a different amount of technological affluency across the generations. Some people just aren't acclimated to online shopping. And then there's also economic factors in terms of SNAP recipients, for example, cannot buy products online and have them shipped to their homes. Many retailers like Kroger and Walmart are now enabling that for curbside pickup. But for delivery, it's just not possible. So there are still systemic factors that are forcing people into stores. Malls, however, when you look at that, or you look at those types of businesses, most of the research reports are saying that people are still a little bit fearful. That only some of the numbers I've seen, as many as 40% of people are actually comfortable going in a mall. So that means 60% are uncomfortable. So you've got a discretionary purchase here, which, yes, people might come, but to what degree? And so you can try to lean into all the safety measures and traffic metering you want, but that might not be the best first approach, in my opinion. The best first approach is actually to take more inspiration from what the grocers have been doing in terms of curbside pickup, curbside returns, dedicated hours for at-risk people. What types of complementary capabilities do you need to have around that? Those are the important things that I would think about first before you actually open the doors into the actual building, so to speak.
Interesting. Yeah. And I know you brought that up in the podcast briefly around, the necessary measures, because obviously there's the mall itself, and then there are all of the retailers, all of the brands that make up that mall experience. So what really needs to be put into place to ensure that those operations are where they need to be in order to optimize that curbside experience, especially if, say, someone wants to order from several brands for a shopping trip? What does that look like?
I think that's what's tricky. And that's where I think the American public actually needs to start demanding this a little bit too. I think the malls have to step up. My fear right now in the conversations that I'm having is that many of the mall developers across the country are leaving this up to the retailers to figure out. But that's very difficult for the consumer, right? Okay, I'm going to throw Gap out because I use it all the time and I used to work there too. But I never said I want to go to the Gap, anymore. I mean, maybe I did back in its heyday, but now it's like, okay, I'm going to go to the mall. So, if I want to go to the Gap or if I want to go to what a mall is about, which is a collection of different retailers or different experiences, I need a place to go to find all of that as the digital face before I venture out there. The mall developers have to pull and collate all that together. If they just have one-off retailers, like say 5 are working together to create a curbside offering, or another 10 are doing it their way, or vice versa, and they're trying to deliver as well, that all just becomes really disjointed and hard for everyone to figure out. So the mall developers need to step up, and they need to create new digital front faces to their properties. Almost like looking forward and saying, the physical entity is just not going to exist for a year to a year and a half. What do we do? And let's work backwards. I think that starts with trying to create online marketplaces for the retailers that are there. They have the ability and the leverage now to say, hey, you need us, put your products on sale with us on these marketplaces, and also make that the conduit by which consumers can then elect to have products picked up at curbside out in front of those malls, or even possibly delivered to their own homes through the retailers' networks that they already have established. There's no sense having the retailers try to figure out and coordinate this all by themselves. The malls should play that role naturally, in my opinion.
Interesting. So that kind of allows for a few things. It allows people to shop at the local level, which has always been a talking point or a challenge for certain retailers, right? Getting to that store level inventory availability so people can best plan and, be served based on their needs. But then it seems like there's also an opportunity for added services or added personalization. So maybe there's, a assisted selling type offering, or going back to Best Buy's use case, appointment scheduling, where, you have an expert or a concierge to kind of guide you through that. So are there several layers or opportunities here that, could possibly scale and, evolve over time?
Exactly. I love how you're thinking about that. That's why I love doing this with you. Like, I love the dialectical. Like, that's exactly it. Like, the maps are out there. So, like, yes, like I said, think a year to a year and a half. What would we do if we never opened again? And then let's figure out the answers. They're very different answers. And how do we just allow people to come back and do what they used to do in February, just but much more safely? Because I'm not sure everyone wants to do that. Maybe some people do, but definitely not everyone does. And so you're right. Best Buy is a great example. How did they go through that? I think this is what Best Buy is doing. Best Buy is saying, all right, first, we're just going to make our stores available for pickup only. Next phase, we're going to allow you to schedule appointments. That enables us to control and meter traffic even more so than anyone else. Let's learn from that, and let's decide what the next phase is. And it could be any number of services that come on top of that. But that, yes, is the right phased approach to get there. And you have to remember, too, like I said before, the malls have a tremendous amount of leverage to be able to get the retailers and the consumers to adopt new habits in this time. And the malls need that more than ever. The malls weren't in a great place before all this happened. They need to look at it as like as an untapped opportunity upon which they can take great advantage of.
Yeah, very interesting. So I guess looking at it through the long-term lens, because this, I think, the ripple effect could last, 12 to 18 months at this point. I mean, who really knows,
Right.
is what comes after that. Okay, let's bridge online and offline. Let's add some digital services or more like one-to-one type services to start to ease people back into the mall. So what's the next layer? How do we tackle that? Not just getting people to the mall, but getting them to, spend recreational time there, spend, an hour or two in there versus like, okay, I just need to get my things and get the heck out of here because I'm really uncomfortable right now.
No, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying too is like, how do we create the mall experience of the 21st century that everybody wants? Because the one that everybody used to love in the 1980s during Fast Times at Ridgemont High is dead, right? Like, no one cares about that anymore. And so to that point, like, now you have the time to recreate that. And so like the next layer to me would be, how do I actually start to put in place the technology that enables my mall to work and act more like a Disneyland or a cruise ship, where I can go anywhere in that space with simple technology? Maybe it's my mobile phone, maybe it's some type of device, but I can literally buy or order anything I want. And I don't have to think about it as all these different disjointed experiences together. I can walk into the Gap with my mobile phone, quickly pay. I can walk into J. Crew, quickly pay. I can then go eat and quickly pay. Kind of a ubiquitous, almost point of sale experience, similar to like Disneyland with its magic band or how you go on a cruise ship. Now's the time for malls to do that. The feedback I always get is, well, the retailers will never go for it. And I always say, well, the retailers go for it all the time on Amazon. Amazon handles payment all the time, as do many online marketplaces. Why is a mall any different? At the end of the day, it's just a physical marketplace. You're just asking the mall to provide different infrastructure beyond just four walls anymore, like we always have in the past. That's the type of thing that will elevate the mall experience for the future. I mean, who doesn't? I always say this, and I get a lot of great feedback on it. Who doesn't want to walk through a mall with a Starbucks in one hand, or even maybe like, let's say, a glass of wine in one hand, their phone in the other, and just say, you know what, I'll have this. Oh, and there it's waiting for me curbside as I get in my car and drive away, instead of having to carry all my bags throughout, entire large shopping mall experience. That's just a better way to shop. And I don't understand why no one has tried to create that yet, but now's the time.
Mm-hmm. See, now you're bringing up wine while walking around a mall.
Yeah.
Now you're starting to speak my language.
Speak the language, right? There's a Friday night that no one's ever had before. I would love that.
Yeah. I guess my question is, going back to, the retailers will never go for it. Right. Is there like a brand component to it that may be holding some, I'm putting my marketing hat on now as a content person. Amazon, of course, has that brand clout. Sure. So many people are engaged and loyal to them. So I guess it may be a bit more forgiven. But I mean, looking at it through the lens of like a mall, is there kind of a disconnect there? Like, is there going to be some work that needs to be done to fully get people on board to that approach, I guess, from a brand loyalty? Because now's the time people are thinking of how do I get people to come back to us when now they're filling out so many different options online and we maybe lost a few forever. So
yeah, I think that's an awesome question. I think it really comes down to, that's why I say there's so much onus that has to fall on the developer now. I mean, the mall operator in a lot of ways has to think like a merchant now, to say, this is my full collection of space, and what's the why for why they're going to come to that place to begin with. And so number one, the balance between entertainment and retail is going to shift. I think different malls are still trying to figure that out. And then the quality of the different retailers or entertainment offerings or food offerings that are enabled in those spaces are going to be different too, depending on if you're trying to play high end, middle, or low end. But the art of it is that you figure out how to create that right portfolio and create the right technology that bridges across all those things. And if some people don't want to come on board with that, given what you're trying to design, then my answer would be, well, then don't have them in your mall. And at the end of the day, the malls weren't in a great position heading into this, unless you were like an A quality mall to begin with. There's a lot of opportunity to figure out who that right collection of partners is across all the locales in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that creates new opportunity. Or I guess this could be a follow-up question. Is there an opportunity to create new partnerships with like up and coming brands, like DTC brands, almost using that digital marketplace as a testing ground for local interest? Is that making sense? Like I feel like there may be a connecting point there.
It totally does, because I think fundamentally what we're talking about, if we step back, 30,000 feet, and what I should have said in the beginning is really what you're talking about too, is that the malls are doing these things to create new economies of scale for the people that operate inside of them. And so to your point about new digitally native upstart brands or even legacy brands, much of what we're talking about gives them new ways to reach their consumers more cheaply, because the mall is taking the leadership position to band them together and to approach their business in a different way. So consolidated curbside pickup at a location that everyone's already coming to, well, that's a huge benefit for every retailer, because it's one spot that they're having to go to instead of everyone doing it themselves. You can almost co-opt into that type of system and setup. Same with another thing we haven't talked about, co-op marketing. Like, when was the last time a mall had a coordinated sale? It doesn't really exist. And if it does, it's not well marketed and spoken to the consumer in the right way. And so there's a lot of different aspects. The other one I love is what about fulfillment? So digitally native brands, what do they need? Well, they need help getting close to the consumer, not only from a physical perspective, but also still delivering the goods. So why aren't malls setting themselves up to be able to handle those types of deliveries for all of their tenants too? God knows they have the space, and there's many people that are talking about this now, but the malls could be a coordinated pick and pack site for a lot of the people that are doing business inside it. So yes, digitally native brands could definitely benefit from this. And then people will get the interest from the fact that there's possibly some new tenants in there that they haven't seen before, that can change out more frequently because the infrastructure and the scale allows that to happen.
Right. And then I could imagine, like, looking at through the lens of those startup brands, it's like, wow, our sales in the New York area, because that's where I am, it shot up, X number of percent. We know people at these malls want to buy from us. Should we invest in a storefront or at the very least a kiosk, right? So that kind of gets into the layer of, what does the future hold for mall retailer partnerships, right? Because a lot of these developers are struggling to find and keep these relationships, right? So it seems like there's a bit of a ripple effect that could be possible there.
Yeah, and that's where if I'm a brand trying to contemplate retail for the first time, if I say, oh wow, here's a mall, they've got coordinated curbside and returns for, return pickup for me or drop off for me. They can help me ship out of that location, which is already close to, a segment of the population that likes my brand online. I mean, imagine if it's an LA company where they're having to ship across the country to New York, right? Like in your example, imagine there's a New York location that offers those types of things. Oh, and then I can draft off the advertising activity of every other thing that's happening in that mall. Yeah, why wouldn't I want to look at that location relative to everything, that's been traditionally done the way it's been done? It just,
right.
I don't know, to me, it seems like it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So it seems like we're kind of indirectly building a partner ecosystem here for all these malls, which leads me to my follow-up question around those fulfillment options. Obviously, a lot of traction for, the Instacarts of the world for grocery, a lot of services like that, trying to add that speed and convenience for consumers who need it. Of course, to your point earlier, that does vary depending on geographic territory. So is there opportunity for those players to get involved in this ecosystem as well to ultimately help them, up their profit and their value from a business perspective?
Yeah, I think potentially. I mean, I think that's where it depends on who the mall operators want to settle up with from a partnership standpoint. Players like that could be involved in the mix, but you could also see it, evolving other ways too, in terms of, figuring out, do they want to use third party? Do they want to try to do it themselves in a very consolidated way with the right partners? But lots of different options, and that's the cool thing about right now is there's so many different ways to approach this. But it really is at the end, it takes leadership and it takes kind of the innovation and the vision to try to bring it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the connecting point between all of these possibilities is the people to drive it. We can get into the leadership side in a second, but obviously
Yeah.
we need workers to kind of make the magic happen, whether that's the the concierge type experience or the fulfillment. So where do you envision, and again, knowing that this is all hypothetical and just what's possible right now, but where is the workforce share coming from? Is it largely the brands that would be hiring and helping fill the roles that trickle down into the mall, or is the mall going to have an extended workforce that maybe it wouldn't have otherwise?
Yeah, or it has to some degree for other things, and they're just now having to create new centers of excellence for themselves, right? That's
Fair point.
more of how I think about it. And the malls, it's funny, like you look at mall contracts where now from my understanding, like you've got co-op marketing funds. How are they being deployed? There's some group of people that are probably devoted to that. Well, running a curbside operation out the front door isn't any different. And so, it's just, I think you set it up the same way where you say, hey, come do business with us as part of your lease. You get this. It's, it's kind of woven into the price. And as a result, we as the operators, we'll run this and we'll staff this for you and we'll make it happen. And that happens across all those aspects that we just talked about.
Mm-hmm. Great point. So thinking about this, putting my executive hat on, if we were to make this a reality, right?
Yeah.
How would you even go about measuring? Let's start with the metrics, right? And then we can kind of work backwards of like how this can even become a reality. What would be the KPIs here? Because I could imagine that they are either, expanded, like you're gonna have a broader set of metrics to look at success from a brand perspective, or are they completely new metrics that they would be looking at? Because I'm sure, time spent or acquisition, you tell me, what would we be thinking about here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold. I mean, I think, we're putting the onus on the mall operators first and foremost. So I think first and foremost, I think there's some things that don't change. Like you're still going to have all the traditional metrics by which you judge your success, which is probably your tenancy, the rates you're charging for the spaces that you're leasing out. That's still, going to be the key factor because that's going to tell you if the demand is really there. And then, of course, you've got the mix in terms of whether it's entertainment or retail and how that all factors in. But the other place, I think the second part, and this is true of all retail, and I think we talked about grocery before, we talked about Best Buy, but I think the smart companies are starting to pivot in this direction. The mall is no different. So to meet criteria number one and whatever goals you set out for yourself in that range, you also have to start measuring performance differently. And so traditionally, how have retailers done that? It's been sales per square foot, et cetera, and traffic. Well, now you actually have to start to get into some of the metrics that have more traditionally been seen in the quick serve restaurant industry, right? How long does it take for me to get the customer my order? What's the prep time? How long have they been waiting? What are the different contact points they've had to go through? Where are the pain points that have happened? Like the quick serve restaurant model is where we're going. It's where we've been going for a while now. It's funny too, because it's been around, forever, since McDonald's, whenever the hell that started, I don't even know. But that's actually, all we're talking about is how do we make stores operate more like that so that they can flexibly fulfill any consumer's needs depending on when the consumer wants them the most. So I think that's the second pivot you'll see in terms of the metric side of things.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this evolves, the, the added service component of of retailing? Like, we were talking so much about experiential and
Yeah.
like how do we maximize, time that people spend testing things or playing with things. And I mean, Beta is a company that was developed with that very principle in mind, and using those engagement metrics to get people to rent space. So, I mean, I'm wondering if there's going to be a pivot as far as that movement goes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Muslim Gonzalez and I were talking about that for Shop Talk recently too. I think, the experiential aspect is still going to be the big thing. I mean, again, when it fundamentally comes down to why are you coming there to shop? That's it. I mean, when you look at why stores exist, I think you and I have talked about this before, but stores have always existed for 5 reasons. They've been a place of immediate gratification, a place of convenience, a place of inspiration. What Beta is trying to do, this idea of taction, touching, feeling, giving confidence in why you're buying what you're buying. That's really more, I think, also what Beta is playing on versus like the experience, where the experience to me is more like this last point I'm going to mention, which is the memory. Like the memory of being somewhere, like I'm doing something out in the world outside of the houses that we're all trapped in right now, because just we need that psychologically, right? And we can do that by ourselves or with other people. But it's really those last 2 points, the taction and the memory creating aspect, that are what make physical spaces just the joys that they can be. And so people are still going to need to figure that out. But I think the reason I brought up everything that I did in the beginning is there's still going to be just a lot less of that over time. And COVID is hastening that effect. There'll still be a share of business that's done in the physical world because, in some ways it can offer some conveniences, but in general, it's going to continue to decline. And as a result, as that decline is happening, you've got to figure out how to get more scale in the operation. And if you can do that, then you might be able to find a happy middle.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, even just thinking about it through the lens of the brands that are doing digital so well right now and, are creating content and services to try and bridge that gap. So to your point about memory, right? There are some things that digital just can't provide.
No.
And one example that really comes to mind, and I'm gonna millennial myself out, but Kim Kardashian West, right?
Sure.
Big on social media. She has a treasure trove of digital content on her Skims website. But I think about the live fashion runway that they did in a Nordstrom store when they launched that partnership, and seeing the products and just the wow factor of seeing all of the models dressed the same and of all different shapes and skin tones. That's like the wow. That's the memory that you're like, I saw it on social media. I was like, oh, geez, I wish I could see that in person, because like, wow, what a moment. So I guess it kind of goes back to that concept of build the best of your brand experience and find out what renders best on those channels. But the key is being where your customer is.
All right, and you're bringing up an awesome point too, because like there's a lot of nuance to what you just said, right? Like, so that's the thing is like experience. When I want to go out of the house for an experience, it may not be for retail anymore, because there's now so many ways to experience retail, and even to the point of Beta, there's so many ways to actually get traction now too. So like I could actually just order something online and return it. That gives me traction, and the models for returns are changing every day. But the point you're hitting on is like retailers also have to be smart about the fact of, and we talked about having a digital face. What they should also be exploring right now are what are the other ways to connect digitally with my consumer that have not been exploited before. I think what you just hit on is huge. Like video commerce or live stream commerce is not something that really is prevalent over here yet. You look at Singles Day on Alibaba, they're doing tremendous volume on that. Now's the time for retailers to try to get behind that here. You mentioned a great example, and there's plenty of other examples by which you could do that. I think the fallacy, though, which you're also starting to see on social media, I'm seeing this a lot, is now people are trying to say, well, let's use VR for retail, right? Let's recreate the physical experience through VR goggles, and that's how people are going to want to shop. And I would ask, is it really, or is that completely missing the point of what the physical space is supposed to be? And are there other digital platforms like the ones you just mentioned that are cheaper, that don't require me to put goggles on my face to partake of them?
Right.
Like that, when we play it back like that, there's just better answers that start to emerge.
Right. So not tech just for tech's sake. Sometimes it's as simple as, going to cosmetics, showing the swatch of what things look like on your arm. I mean, people go gaga over it because it adds clarity to the purchase decision. It's simple. And then if you integrate with Instagram or have, shoppable feeds, it's easy as that, and you're selling out. So
right, exactly. And it's super simple, and we all get it. I laugh at this. Is just funny aside and a joke, and decide if we end up keeping it or not. But like, I joke like all this like new like kind of fervor around VR. It's like VR hasn't even taken off in porn, and yet we're thinking it's going to like change. Like, there's a whole host of reasons for that, right? So like, can we just chill it on like VR taking the place of stores? I don't get it, but anyway.
Then we're getting into Black Mirror territory, and that's when things get dangerous. You're getting in a black hole of misery and disaster.
Sorry, I'm going to go off on a rant here, but like, by the way, no one has any money right now either. So who's shelling down money for goggles? Like, it's just, come on, let's be realistic here, guys. And let's put our priorities in the right places. And that's trying to figure out how do you talk to a consumer digitally in a very cost-effective way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Chris, we've hit on a lot of great stuff here, a lot of inspiration, a lot of, things that brands should be prioritizing, thinking about, going back to this mall concept where digital and physical are bridging. We're bringing contactless, we're bringing, curation and concierge services. We're bringing entertainment back. We're going the whole nine. We're covering it all. The onus seems to be on the mall developers, but I mean, what are the key takeaways for everyone watching right now? There may be some mall developers out there, some retailers. So, I mean, what should they be thinking about right now as we think about the way forward?
I think there's definitely some mall developers out there that are thinking this way. And I think it's probably the same ones that you would say have been thinking about it well to begin with, who have thought about the mall around those last 2 points, as a point of taction or as a pure place to make memories, either by yourself or with your families or with other people. So I think you'll see it. But it'll be few and far between. It's unfortunate, especially when you look at just how regional malls are operated. But my advice, I think, is I come back to what I said in the beginning, which is, I think now is the greatest retail experimentation hall pass ever. We've never had a hall pass greater than this. Consumers are willing to change their habits if you can give them a reason why. You don't hit your head against a brick wall on that side of things. So ask them to use a mobile app in a way they haven't before. Well, now's the chance to do it. And so what does that mean for you? Well, it means strategically think about the other. Ask yourself the question, man, if the business model that we used to know doesn't exist for a year or 2 years, what does that mean for us? And instead of being a physical first entity, as most of retail has always been, how do we truly position ourselves for the first time as a digital first entity, which quite honestly is why Amazon has been eating everyone's lunch for so long. But it's time everyone adapts that mindset and then work backwards. And guess what? If this thing's over and it blows over faster than we think, then awesome, because you're just going to be set up that much better. But if you continue to lever up physical first, you're not going to get anywhere. That's going to be a lot of activity for very little accomplishment, especially when all of this is over.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think it's affording a lot of legacy brands the opportunity to take a hard look at where their business was and what the possibilities are. It's almost like a rebirth moment, so to speak. So people are thinking less about what now, but more why not, which is really exciting. So I guess we'll see what happens.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. It's a reckoning, so to speak. I think that's it. It's a retail reckoning for those that are able to handle it and those that aren't.
Yeah. Awesome, Chris. Well, thanks as always for taking the time out. A lot of fun. Again, we went way beyond the question list. So thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with me today.
Anytime. I love it. Every time. Thank you so much.
All right. And thanks everyone out there for watching. Take care.